The next crash I'd like to reference is one that took place in 1954 on a tiny island off of the German coast in the North Sea, in an island called Heligoland, which was used as a U-boat base for the Germans in World War II. Story has it that a disc was brought down on this island, which was so remote, and as the military authorities approached it, they bombarded it with Geiger counters and cosmic rays to make sure that there was no radioactivity. And as they approached it, they found 7 charred bodies burned beyond recognition surrounding the craft, and they weren't sure if these were actual crew and occupants of the craft, or that they were just curious citizens of the island of Heligoland. Anyways, these beings were 5 foot 8 inches tall, anywhere between 25 and 35 years old, with perfect teeth. We've heard that before. What brought the craft down, because it was in perfect condition, they think was hydrogen bomb tests created an anomalous change and sudden and drastic or catabolic change in the Earth's atmosphere and air pressure, and because of the sudden shift in air pressure, it brought the saucer to Earth. Now, when investigators got there, again, this report coming from Flying Saucer Digest, when investigators got there, they were able to lift up the saucer with 2 men. It was so light. They noticed it was made of 2 metals unknown to mankind, one on the outside and one that lined the cabin. The one on the outside similar to aluminum, yet there were no rivets, nails, bolts, or seams. And they tried to heat it to 15,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and it would not yield. Inside the craft itself, they found living quarters, a bunk near the captain's quarters for smaller beings. They found tablets that they thought was tabulated food. They also found some sort of strange liquid that was 3 times heavier than water, but seemed to be some sort of fluid or food ingested by the occupants. And finally, the radio was the size of a cigarette pack that they used to transmit. The landing gear, it was a tripod-type landing gear, 3 beams with balls for the pods of the feet. And again, the bodies, no one could say whether they were the actual occupants or if they were the flight crew in this strange story that surfaces in 1954. February 26, 1968, a Russian peasant farmer, Vasily Dubachev, is in his truck when he notices off to the left of field there's a cylindrical object hovering at about 400 feet with pulsating and rotating red, blue, and green lights. Well, he notices it's pacing his vehicle, then it heads up over a ridge and there's a gigantic explosion. So he pulls his truck off the road and hustles over to the explosion area and can find no debris, but except charred land. And 50 yards away from the charred land, he sees this space monster, as he called it. So he calls in Dr. Pyotr Borodny, a Russian biologist, and they bring in another Russian astronomer to view the body. And apparently, this thing was 4 feet tall. It looked just like a human being, except that it had no nose. And when they did the autopsy, again, this is all speculation coming from Flying Saucer Digest, they could find no lungs. So they assumed, or they found no digestive system. But they assumed that the way this creature fed was absorbing nitrogen or helium through its skin. But looking at it again, they noticed that the skin was clear plastic, and they could see little blue veins in the face, almost like a fish head was the way they described it. And then upon microscopic inspection, they noticed that the molecules were not carbon-based, but silicon-based. And what's more, they noticed that the body could withstand temperatures up to 1,000 degrees. So the astronomer in this case, obviously, along with the biologist Dr. Borodny, speculation runs rampant. He thinks that based on the components of silicon in its most basic atomic complexion, he likens it to the atmosphere of Venus, and goes one step further and says that this creature came from Venus because the sister is similar to our planet in atmosphere and structure, although it's very dense in hydrogen, helium, and nitrogen. And he goes on to say that he felt that a creature with this type of skin texture had to come from a very, very hot planet. Venus has been likened to the Earth for a millennium by astronomers, some even considering that Venus occupied our orbit at one time before it was eventually pulled in upon its decaying orbit towards the sun. On July 6th, 1947, a jeweler named Norman Hargraves is walking the beach at Trinity Bay in Texas, and he's waiting, and he notices out in the water a clam-shaped, pearl gray in color object with 20 inches in diameter. Well, he walks out to the object, picks it up, it's very lightweight, and notices that says, property of United States Army Air Force, military secret, do not disclose whereabouts or description of object that you have in your hand. Please call collect it at once, such and such a depot at Spokane, Washington. Well, he calls the Spokane depot, he gets a Colonel Boyce on the phone. Colonel Boyce warns him, threatens him not to reveal anything that he's seen, and to call the police in Pelly at once. He calls the police in Pelly, and then a newspaper reporter calls him. He gives the entire story, and then the newspaper says they cannot corroborate his story from the police officers in Pelly. And then finally, a commander from Ellington Field in Texas responds to this and comes out and collects the disc from Norman Hargraves on July 8th of 1947. Again, this is just around the Roswell incident. The Houston Press comes out and says that Mr. Hargraves had perpetuated a hoax. It was an elaborate hoax whereby he made a 20-inch aluminum disc and fooled authorities. Now that it doesn't wash with me, that particular story, if indeed the story is true. The Houston Press does have an actual acknowledgement of this incident in their July 8th, 1947 edition. So during that time period, the United States Air Force, Army Air Force, was testing their own version of flying saucers and flying airfoils. So this sounds like one of their probes or drones plunged into the ocean, and Mr. Hargraves stumbled upon it. Another incident that took place in Texas, a man by the name of Bob Scott from Hillsboro, Texas, while looking in his garden, noticed something that was emitting or reflecting a great deal of light. So he went over and picked it up, and he picked up a 4-inch saucer-shaped object that was spidery and dusty. And the object was as thick as 4 pieces of tinfoil or silver, but it was translucent when he examined it on his side. And again, as he picked it up, though, it began to dissolve slowly in his hand without any heat being felt. And he thought at that point that the Army once again was playing games with its saucer prototypes. In October 1948, some cattlemen, the Calhoun brothers and Norm Clubb, found some fragments near Montrose, Colorado, about 15 miles west of Delta, Colorado. And in April of '49, Noah Clubb was requested by Air Force Intelligence to turn in his piece, as the Calhouns had done. So, according to the descriptions by Noah Clubb, the area where they found it, the crash site, was very rugged territory west of Delta, Colorado. And the piece that they had looked as if it belonged to some sort of circular or rim-shaped device. It was made of light aluminum. And they noticed when the Calhoun brothers and Clubb had both found pieces independent of each other, when they assembled them, they had some sort of wheel-like structure, 4 feet in diameter, with an aluminum center 2 inches across, and some sort of brass spokes that appear on the outside of the wheel that appear to be some sort of a fuel rod. Their 2 pieces were 14 inches and 26 inches in length, and reportedly Air Force Intelligence scoured the area near Montrose and Delta and located a longer piece. Anyways, the story goes, piece is seized from the Calhoun brothers. Clubb is requested to surrender the piece. Anyways, the pieces were seized by 2 Air Force Intelligence officers from Laurie Air Force Base in Denver and taken away. December 18, 1950, University of New Mexico, Dr. Lincoln La Paz reports that the previous month in November that some cattlemen had found what resembled a nylon flower pot made of Dura aluminum, actually, with nylon fibers inside of it, connected to a cheap alarm clock with an expensive micro switch. Now, on the pot itself was a demarcation of 29, and inside they found 3 rolls of film manufactured in Great Britain, dated November 14th, 1949. So they seem to think that whatever this thing was, it was launched on the 29th of November, and there were several reports of green fireballs in the area, in and around November 29th, in that area where this particular piece was found. The flower pot-shaped vehicle was 18 inches in diameter and weighed 7 pounds 2 ounces. Also coming to my attention through the research of Flying Saucer Digest, a letter into the editor in a 1991 edition asks Almanac, Al, can you tell me anything about the Washington State UFO crash in 1970? And Almanac's response is, no, can you? On June 24th, 1987, entertainer Jackie Gleason died. The reason why I bring this up is because not only was he a great comedian, but he was very much interested in the UFO phenomenon. Now, revealed by his second wife after his passing, one night Jackie came home in 1973, very disturbed, very shaken, and eager to unburden himself with the information that he was carrying. Now, Jackie Gleason had an extensive UFO library, had all of the films, and did extensive study into it. He was also a very close friend of then-President Richard Nixon. The story goes that Nixon arranged for Gleason to go to Homestead Air Force Base in Florida, where there was a repository of alien remains, alien bodies, alien spacecraft, and Jackie Gleason had an opportunity to tour that, and of course was sworn to secrecy, but that he not only were his beliefs confirmed that UFOs exist and they are visiting this planet, but also that the United States military is covering up the information. So Almanac wrote to Jackie Gleason but never got a response as to the validity of the stories, saying that he had toured Homestead Air Force Base and had been into the quote-unquote alien body storage and repository. I mentioned the flower pot device that was found by Dr. Lincoln La Paz. Well, it was found by some shepherds in New Mexico. But people don't understand regarding balloons. The United States was bombed, the continental United States was bombed by Japan in 1945. One balloon bomb fell in Klamath Falls, Oregon, and 3, count them, 3 fell in Lawrence, Holstein, and Pocahontas, Iowa, 3 towns. That happened on February 2nd, 1945. Now, the FBI and the CIA put wraps on these stories because they wanted to perpetuate the story of American invulnerability and American invincibility, keep that going, because if the Japanese had found out that these rice paper balloon bombs that armed with explosives that they were sending aloft, hoping to catch a jet stream, moving from west to east, were actually hitting the continental United States, of course, they would be catastrophic. They'd be launching them probably by the thousands daily. So Reverend Archie Mitchell was out picnicking with his family, his wife and 3 children and 2 friends, and he went to park the car, and while his family went to a picnic table, the children started pulling on the lines of this strange sheet-like thing. Anyways, it was a Japanese balloon bomb, blew up, killed the 6 people, and there is a commemorative plaque now in Klamath Falls commemorating the heroics of the only 6 casualties who died on the continental United States during World War II. Also, during World War II, there was an air raid of Los Angeles in 1942, February 1942, whereby 1,500 rounds of ammunition were fired at some sort of gigantic discoidal object that hovered over the central city of Los Angeles. And finally, the response to the Roswell crash that was released in September of 1994, basically saying that it was Project Mogul that went down in Roswell, that Marcel had indeed found not a raw one-target balloon, but an actual super-sensitive secret device that was used by the military to listen for high atmospheric nuclear blasts. And they released that this past September, that story. Whether it's valid or not, I can't say. But we know that going on in that area of New Mexico and the deserts of Nevada and Arizona, for that sake, are always all sorts of military tests, whether they be aeronautical tests or testing the enemy's weaponry that they've confiscated. For instance, V-2s. It could have been a V-2 rocket that Mac Brazel found in the desert in Roswell that was being experimented and flown for research by the Army Air Force at that time. So I'd like to conclude my lecture today. I'd like to thank my resources, Flying Saucer Digest, Almanac from the United Aerial Phenomena Agency, UAPA, the UFO Casebook, Kevin D. Randall, UFO Crash at Roswell, Kevin D. Randall, Don Schmidt, Timothy Good's book, the UFO Report, and numerous other publications that I had to scour to bring you this information this afternoon. In closing, I'd like to bring you a story about Dwight D. Eisenhower. On February 20th, 1954, Dwight D. Eisenhower, President of the United States, had returned from a quail hunting trip in Georgia and immediately went on vacation again, this time to Paul Roy Helms Ranch, known as Smoke Tree Ranch, out near Palm Springs, California. Well, the press secretary at that time, Jim Haggerty, didn't have to go along. Ike was on another vacation. And suddenly, at about 5 in the afternoon, the reporters who were gathered noticed that there was some sort of commotion within the Smoke Tree compound, that some of the president's staff had become a bit harried. And 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock went on, and Merriman Smith of UPI demanded to see the president. And at that point, the under-press secretary, could not accommodate Merriman Smith's wishes. At that point, they summoned press secretary Jim Haggerty. Haggerty shows up, very unhappy, trying to find the president's whereabouts. Nobody knew where Dwight D. Eisenhower was. So it's 10 o'clock at night, and Merriman Smith goes to his UPI wire and says that the president is critically ill. And an hour later, Associated Press goes one step further and says that Dwight D. Eisenhower, President of the United States, is dead. At that point, Haggerty, very upset, releases a statement amid what Time magazine called bedlam and pandemonium, as far as the reporters were trying to get the information extracted from Mr. Haggerty. So he said that Ike had a medical problem, that he chipped his tooth on a chicken bone, and that he had gone to see a dentist. So Eisenhower returned late that night, and the next day there was a big to-do, a press briefing and a photo opportunity whereby the dentist and Ike posed with a barbecue. Now, contacted years later, the daughter of the dentist, who was about 12 years old at the time, could not recall anything, could not recall the president coming to her house, could not recall any commotion. She was very agitated by the line of questioning provided by Bill Moore from the Roswell Incident, classic study of UFO contact. He wrote that book along with Stan Friedman, and I've referenced that in this lecture here. So he found that quite odd, Bill Moore did, that here it is, a 12-year-old girl can't remember the president of the United States is inside the house having his tooth worked on. And the only thing she could offer up was she remembered her father being on the phone, quote, all night. So, of course, the story then goes on and says that Ike was spirited off to Muroc Air Force Base, which is now Edwards Air Force Base because of its vicinity near Palm Springs, to view the remains of a crashed saucer and alien bodies. They said that he traveled by helicopter to Muroc from Palm Springs, and that's why he went undetected. He was able to manage to alleviate himself from his crew and make his way out to the desert, where he was picked up by a chopper and flown to Muroc, viewed the remains, and then flown back late that night.